And the first thing that happens, usually, is the love scene.
They called her the most elegant woman in Hollywood, a vision of grace, composure, and quiet mystery. Diane Lane moved through fame like she was born to belong there, untouchable, self-contained, immune to the noise that devoured others. Her poise became her armor, her beauty a shield. To the outside world, she was perfection personified. But behind the soft voice and measured smile lived a woman who had been undone by something far more dangerous than fame love. For decades, she kept that truth tucked away behind polite interviews and red carpet grace. Then at 60, she finally opened the vault and revealed what no one expected. 6 men, 6 stories, 6 loves that shaped her heart and haunted her soul. NTHE first was Richard Gere, the man who made her believe that chemistry could rewrite reality. When they met on the set of Unfaithful in 2002, the air between them shifted. Richard was calm, magnetic, and devastatingly confident, the kind of man who didn't need to speak to be felt. During their first table read, Diane looked into his eyes and lost her place on the page. That moment, she later admitted, wasn't acting. It was instinct. Their scenes together blurred the boundaries between fiction and truth, between character and confession. Both were married at the time, both aware of the risk, but Diane described it perfectly. It felt like standing too close to fire. You know it will burn you, but you can't step away. Their on-screen chemistry didn't end when the camera stopped rolling. Crew members whispered about the tension that lingered, a quiet electricity that even silence couldn't extinguish. When they reunited years later for Nights in Rodanthe, that buried spark reignited, softer perhaps, but unmistakably alive. For Diane, Richard Gere represented forbidden intimacy, the elegant danger of wanting something she could never have. Then came Josh Brolin, and everything changed. If Gere was a slow, smoldering fire, Josh was a storm. Their connection was instant, reckless, and impossible to control. He was energy in human form, unpredictable, passionate, and magnetic. Diane once called him pure instinct and danger. Where Richard's quiet gaze unsettled her, Josh's wild charm consumed her. They married quickly, swept away by a love that felt both thrilling and doomed. To the world, they were the perfect Hollywood couple, glamorous, fiery, inseparable. Behind closed doors, however, that same passion turned volatile. Their arguments were as fierce as their affection. Jealousy, pressure, and fame magnified every flaw. In 2004, a heated argument led to police being called a private heartbreak dragged into the public eye. The tabloids called it a misunderstanding. Diane called it the moment love began to hurt more than it healed. Their marriage continued for years, but the cracks never closed. By 2013, the fire had burned itself out, leaving behind only ashes and memories. Still, when she spoke of Josh later, her tone was never bitter. "He had a soul you don't forget," she said softly. "He made you believe in forever, even if forever only lasted a few years." NTWO men, one forbidden, one destructive, had already defined her understanding of passion. Richard taught her that temptation could whisper and still leave scars. Josh showed her that desire could roar until it tore everything apart. Between them, Diane Lane began to realize that love is never gentle. It tests, consumes, and transforms. Behind her perfect composure stood a woman who had lived through both ecstasy and ruin. Someone who learned that love doesn't always save you. Sometimes, it simply reminds you that you're still capable of feeling. And for Diane Lane, that truth was far more dangerous than any Hollywood scandal. Before the world saw her as Hollywood's sophisticated muse, Diane Lane was a young woman chasing purpose and belonging in an industry that devoured innocence. She was barely out of her teens when she met Tom Cruise, long before he became the unstoppable global phenomenon he is today. It was the early 1980s on the set of The Outsiders, a film filled with restless energy and rising stars who would soon define an era. Tom walked onto that set like a comet, bright, fast, and impossible to ignore. He had that rare mix of confidence and chaos, as if every moment mattered more than the last. Diane, still discovering who she was, felt that spark the instant he looked at her. Tom's drive fascinated her. He was obsessed with perfection, rehearsing lines until dawn, arguing about lighting, chasing the smallest details with relentless passion. He wanted to be great, not famous. And that hunger was magnetic. Diane found herself drawn to it, not out of romance, but out of awe. Yet as the days passed, their connection deepened into something quieter, more dangerous. They talked for hours about ambition, fear, and the strange loneliness that comes with wanting everything. When he looked at her, it felt as if he could see through all the walls she'd built. "When Tom looks at you," she once said softly, "it's like he's seeing straight through the noise." Their bond was never physical, but it was powerful, a secret understanding between two souls on the edge of becoming. The gossip magazines noticed their closeness, whispering about secret meetings and late-night calls. Both denied it, but Diane's later confession said everything. "I never crossed the line," she said, "but I thought about it. It wasn't love, exactly. It was temptation dressed as inspiration." Tom was the embodiment of everything she admired and feared in herself, ambition without boundaries. And in his reflection, she saw the version of Diane Lane the world would one day worship. Fearless, focused, and untouchable. Years later, that memory would linger, not as regret, but as a quiet ache. Because Tom wasn't a lost love. He was a mirror of the life she chose, the dreams that came true, and the sacrifices they required. But just as she began to master control, fate introduced her to someone who would shake it all again, not through chaos, but through stillness. NTHAT Man was Kevin Costner, and his effect on Diane was unlike anything before. Where Tom had been fire and youth, Kevin was calm and gravity. They had worked together before, but on the set of Let Him Go in 2020, something had changed. Time had refined them both, the noise of Hollywood had dulled, and what remained was clarity. Two veterans who understood loss, aging, and the silence between moments. Kevin didn't flirt. He didn't need to. His presence spoke for him. Diane once said, he could make standing still look like seduction. During one late-night scene, their eyes met across the dimly lit set, and for a heartbeat, the world went quiet. Crew members joked about the tension, but Diane didn't laugh. She knew it wasn't a joke. It was connection. It wasn't explosive like her past loves. It was subtle, grounding, and infinitely more dangerous because it reached something deeper. "He made me realize," she later confessed, "that attraction doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers." When filming ended, Kevin hugged her goodbye and whispered, "You're something else, Lane." It was simple, but it stayed with her. Not as flirtation, but as a truth. Diane once said he was the kind of man who can ruin your peace just by being gentle. Unlike the wild passion of her past, this connection was spiritual, two souls meeting quietly in the middle of their own storms. And though neither crossed a line, the temptation lived in what was left unsaid. With Tom Cruise, Diane had learned that love could tempt even the most disciplined heart. With Kevin Costner, she discovered that longing could be silent and still feel eternal. Between them, she found herself torn between two forces, the fire of youth and the calm of maturity, and realized that both were equally capable of undoing her. Because for Diane Lane, love was never about how it began, but how it lingered, in the glances, the silences, and the memories that refused to fade. Before there were scandals, before the magazine covers and the whispers of forbidden chemistry, there was Matt Dillon, the boy who made Diane Lane's heart race for the very first time. It was 1982, on the set of The Outsiders, when both were still discovering what it meant to be young and visible in Hollywood. They were just kids pretending to be adults, standing at the edge of fame with wide eyes and fragile hearts. Matt had that effortless cool, the kind that didn't need words or confidence to be felt. Diane, shy but magnetic, found herself drawn to his quiet strength. Their connection wasn't a headline. It wasn't scandal. It was something simpler, two young souls recognizing something familiar in each other. They'd steal glances between takes, laugh at private jokes, share the same nervous excitement about becoming movie stars. "It was innocent," Diane later said, "but it stayed with me. There were no grand gestures, no confessions of love, just a feeling. That first electric brush with desire that would linger in her memory for decades." Matt became her first real crush, the beginning of her education in emotion. He showed her that affection doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Even years later, when both had gone their separate ways and built their own lives, she would smile when his name came up in interviews. "He was the first one who made me feel something I couldn't explain," she once confessed. And maybe that's why she never truly forgot him. Because some feelings arrive before you know what to call them. NBUT. While Matt represented innocence and the sweetness of firsts, Christopher Lambert embodied the other extreme, passion that burned too hot to last. When Diane met the French-American actor in the late 1980s, she was no longer the uncertain girl on a movie set. She was poised, experienced, and ready for something real. And Christopher was everything she wasn't expecting. Charming, unpredictable, intoxicatingly foreign. He spoke like every word mattered, lived like every day might be the last, and loved with a force that frightened her. They married in 1988, and for a time, it felt like destiny. Their chemistry was undeniable, their connection deep, but the same intensity that drew them together began to tear them apart. "We didn't know how to be calm," Diane said years later. "We only knew how to love like it was war." Their relationship was a dance of extremes. Laughter and shouting, passion and silence, all tangled together in something too alive to die quietly. When they divorced in 1994, it wasn't out of hatred but exhaustion. And yet, even years after the papers were signed, Diane admitted she never stopped wanting him. "Desire doesn't disappear," she said softly. "It just waits." Matt Dillon had given her innocence. Christopher Lambert had given her chaos. Between the two, Diane Lane had lived both sides of love, the gentle beginning and the beautiful ruin. Each man carved something into her story, and by the time she walked away, she understood that love was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to teach. By the time Diane Lane turned 60, the world still saw her as the woman who had it all. Timeless beauty, respect, and a career that never lost its glow. But when she sat down for that now infamous video confession, there was something different in her eyes. It wasn't regret. It was release. After decades of holding her private world together, she finally let it unravel, one story at a time. 6 men, 6 chapters, each one a mirror reflecting a version of herself she had loved, lost, or left behind. NSHE spoke softly, without dramatics or tears. "People think grace means control," she said. "But grace is surviving what almost broke you." And that was the thread running through her entire confession. Not scandal, not sorrow, but survival. Richard Gere had shown her the danger of desire, that love could live in silence and still consume you. Josh Brolin had taught her that passion, no matter how intoxicating, could turn into destruction when it demanded too much. Tom Cruise represented curiosity and temptation, the fleeting thrill of youth that makes you question everything you believe in. Kevin Costner reminded her that connection doesn't need noise. Sometimes the quietest bond is the loudest truth. Matt Dillon had given her the innocence of first affection, while Christopher Lambert embodied the kind of love that makes you forget who you were before it began. Each man was a season in her life, and each one, in his own way, left behind both warmth and scars. What made her confession so powerful wasn't just the honesty but the calm with which she delivered it. She didn't accuse, defend, or dramatize. She spoke like a woman who had finally made peace with every version of herself. The young dreamer, the passionate lover, the broken wife, the quiet survivor. "I don't regret any of them," she said simply. They were all teachers. NTHE audience expected revelations of betrayal or heartbreak, but what they got instead was something deeper. A portrait of a woman who had learned that love, in all its forms, is both a gift and a test. Diane Lane didn't present herself as a victim of her choices. She owned them. She had walked through fire, and though it left marks, it also left wisdom. "People ask me why I never remarried," she said with a faint smile. "The truth is, I did to myself." NTHAT single line became the heartbeat of her confession. It wasn't about the men, or even the memories. It was about reclaiming herself, after years of giving pieces away. She had learned that being loved by extraordinary men didn't define her. Surviving them did. When the video ended, viewers were silent. Some called it brave. Others called it tragic. But for Diane Lane, it was neither. It was freedom. The moment she finally stopped being the character and started being the woman. Because behind the Hollywood perfection, behind the legend of elegance and control, there was always someone real, flawed, fiery, and unafraid to tell the truth about love.